A 19-year-old college student vanishes mid-conversation with his father. 16 years later, after one of the most extensive searches in American history, Brandon Swanson has still never been found. This is Cold Case Chronicle. Before we dive into one of the strangest disappearances I've ever covered, if you're new here, welcome. I'm your host, and on this channel, we examine unsolved cases with the depth and respect they deserve. If you appreciate thorough research and careful analysis of these mysteries, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And if you're already part of our community, thank you. Your support through likes and comments helps us bring attention to cases that desperately need it. Now, let's talk about Brandon Swanson. There is a specific quality to rural Minnesota darkness that's difficult to describe unless you've experienced it. It is absolute, complete. No streetlights dotting the roadside. No ambient glow from neighboring towns softening the horizon. No light pollution whatsoever. Just flat agricultural land stretching endlessly in every direction beneath whatever mercy the moon might offer on any given night. This is Lyon County, Minnesota. Classic heartland America. Farmland organized in perfect grids. Small towns scattered across county roads where everybody knows everybody. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and wave at passing cars, even when they don't recognize the driver. On the night of May 14th, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving home through that darkness. He'd been celebrating the end of his freshman year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He'd had a few drinks with friends. He was ready to get home. It was late, nearly 2 in the morning. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called his parents from somewhere on the dark gravel back roads between the towns of Canby and Marshall. His car was stuck in a ditch. He needed help. He told them exactly where he was, just off Highway 23 near the golf course outside the small town of Lend. Except he wasn't there at all. He was 25 miles away in the wrong direction. High-centered on a minimum maintenance dirt road he never should have been on in the first place. For the next hour and 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the phone with his father, Brian. They tried everything, flashing headlights at each other across the darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse through the vast flatness. They couldn't see each other. Brandon grew increasingly frustrated, confused. How could they not find each other? He made a decision. He would abandon his car and start walking toward lights he believed were the town of Lend. His father drove to meet him there. Brandon walked through empty fields in 39-degree weather. He climbed 2 fences. At one point, he mentioned hearing running water nearby, a detail that would become critically important later. They talked the entire time he walked. A father and son, separated by darkness and distance neither of them understood, trying desperately to find each other. Then, at exactly 3:10 a.m., mid-conversation, Brandon interrupted himself. 2 words. Oh shit. The line went silent. Brian called out for his son. Nothing. Just empty silence on the other end. He hung up and called back. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. He called 5 more times. Brandon never picked up. That was 16 years ago. Brandon Swanson has still never been found. As if he simply stepped off the edge of the world and vanished into the night. This is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. A case where everything that should have led searchers to answers led them nowhere instead. May 13th, 2008, was the last day of classes at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota. For 19-year-old Brandon Swanson, it marked the completion of a 1-year program in wind energy technology. He'd done well. His instructors described him as intelligent, dedicated, succeeding academically. He had solid plans for the future, transferring that fall to Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs, over 250 miles away, to continue studying science. Brandon was from Marshall, Minnesota, a town of about 13,000 people in the southwestern part of the state. He'd graduated from Marshall High School the year before and had been commuting the 35 minutes to Canby for classes all year. He was close with his family, his parents Brian and Annette, and his younger sister Jamine. Friends described him as big-hearted and kind. He loved reading, learning, debate. Politics and history fascinated him. He'd worked part-time at a local grocery store and had been doing so reliably for 4 years. By all accounts, Brandon was a normal, responsible young man. But he did have one physical limitation worth noting. Brandon was legally blind in his left eye. He wore wire-rimmed glasses to correct his vision and was reportedly wearing them the night he disappeared. This detail would become significant later: depth perception issues, navigating uneven terrain in total darkness. That evening, Brandon's mother Annette saw him when he stopped by their house. Everything seemed completely normal. "The things I normally say to him," she later recalled. "See you later and be safe." Around 6 p.m., Brandon drove from Marshall to a small gathering in the nearby town of Lind, just 7 miles away. He spent a few hours there with 5 or 6 friends in someone's backyard. Witnesses said it was a low-key gathering, fairly calm. Brandon had a few drinks, but nobody thought he seemed impaired. Around 10:30 or 11 p.m., Brandon left Lind and drove back through Marshall, then north on Highway 68 to Canby. There was a larger party happening there, another celebration for the end of classes. The timeline gets fuzzy here, as it always does at college parties, but Brandon arrived in Canby sometime around 10:30 that night. Again, alcohol was present. One witness reported seeing Brandon have at least 1 shot of whiskey, but attendees said he seemed happy, chatting with friends, not drunk or heavily impaired. Nobody was concerned about him. He seemed fine. Brandon didn't stay long. Somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., he left the party in Canby alone, intending to drive home to Marshall. This is where everything starts to go wrong. Highway 68 is a well-maintained paved road connecting Canby and Marshall. It's the obvious route, the route Brandon had taken countless times during his year of commuting to school. You drive at highway speeds. There are occasional cars. It's lit by headlights at least. If you're heading from Canby to Marshall, you take Highway 68. There's no reason not to. But Brandon didn't take Highway 68. Instead, he drove on gravel back roads, a network of rural county roads that run roughly parallel to the highway but require multiple turns, navigating in the dark on dirt and gravel with no streetlights. Why would he do this? The prevailing theory is that Brandon had been drinking and wanted to avoid law enforcement. He'd previously been charged with driving under the influence and had worked off a year of probation. Maybe he thought he'd had too much to drink that night and didn't want to risk getting pulled over on the main highway. Better to take the back roads where you're less likely to encounter police. It's speculation, but it makes sense. Young guy, late at night, a few drinks in him, previous DUI on his record. The back roads seemed safer. Except they weren't. These rural gravel roads are organized in a grid pattern: north, south, east, west, intersecting at right angles. If you know where you're going, it's not hard to navigate even without GPS. But if you're tired, if you've been drinking, if it's pitch black outside and you're legally blind in one eye, these roads can become disorienting very quickly. At some point during his drive home, Brandon made a wrong turn, or several wrong turns. He ended up heading west, the wrong direction, back toward Canby instead of south toward Marshall. He was on a minimum maintenance field road, basically a dirt tractor path between 2 enormous crop fields. The fields were empty, recently tilled, waiting for planting season. There were no lights, no landmarks, just darkness and flatness in every direction. At approximately 1:15 a.m., Brandon misjudged a turn. His green Chevy Lumina went down into a shallow ditch. The incline was steep enough that the car high-centered. The wheels lifted off the ground, spinning uselessly. He was stuck. Brandon tried to drive out, forward and reverse. Nothing worked. He tried calling friends for help. Nobody answered. It was too late. Everyone was asleep. Finally, around 1:54 a.m., he called his parents. Brian and Annette Swanson received the call in the middle of the night. Brandon told them his car was stuck in a ditch somewhere between Marshall and Lind. He said he was on the left side of a road near the golf course, just off Highway 23. His parents immediately got in their pickup truck and started driving. Lind is only 7 miles from Marshall. They should have been able to find him quickly, but they couldn't find him anywhere. Brian and Annette drove up and down the gravel roads near Lind, looking for Brandon's car. They were on the phone with him the entire time. Brandon was absolutely certain he knew where he was. He kept describing his location with complete confidence. But there was no sign of him. It was Annette's idea to use the headlights. In that rural darkness, you can see lights from miles away. She told Brandon they were flashing their truck's headlights. "Don't you see us?" Brandon asked. His parents could even hear the sound of him clicking his own headlights on and off through the phone. But they saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. Brandon couldn't see them either. After several minutes of this failing, frustration set in. At one point, Brandon hung up on his mother. She called him back and apologized. Everyone was confused and growing upset. Finally, Brandon made a decision. He told his parents he could see lights in the distance. Lights from what he believed was the town of Lind. He would walk to the Lind Tavern, a bar in Lind that everyone knew. They could meet him there. It wasn't far. He could see the lights. Brian and Annette agreed. Brian drove Annette back to their house in Marshall, then headed to the Lind Tavern to wait for his son. Brandon abandoned his car and started walking. It was after 2 a.m. The temperature had dropped to 39 degrees. Brandon was wearing baggy jeans, a polo shirt, a black hooded sweatshirt, and a Minnesota Twins baseball cap. Not exactly dressed for hiking through fields in near-freezing temperatures. But he was walking fast, trying to get to his parents, trying to get home. Brian stayed on the phone with him while he walked. At some point, Brandon told his father he was going to cut across a field instead of following the gravel road. It would be quicker, he said. A shortcut. They talked while Brandon trudged through the darkness. He climbed over a fence, then another. At one point, he mentioned hearing running water nearby. They stayed on the phone for 47 minutes while Brandon walked. A father and son, separated by darkness and distance neither of them understood, trying to find each other. Then, at 3:10 a.m., something happened. Brandon's voice cut through the phone. "Oh shit," and then silence. The line stayed open, but Brandon was gone. Brandon Swanson called out for his son. "Brandon, Brandon." Nothing. Just silence on the other end of the line. He hung up and immediately called back. The phone rang and rang and rang, then went to voicemail. He called again. Same thing. He called 5 or 6 times. Brandon never picked up. It was after 3 a.m. now. Brian drove up and down roads near the Lind Tavern, searching. He called Annette. She started calling Brandon's friends, waking them up, asking if they'd seen him. Nobody knew where he was. Several of Brandon's friends recognized how serious this was. They got in their cars and joined the search, driving through the dark countryside, looking for any sign of him. By 6:30 a.m., the sun was starting to come up. Annette called the Lyon County Sheriff's Office to report Brandon missing. The response was frustrating. Officers told her it wasn't unusual for a 19-year-old to stay out all night celebrating the end of classes. They had procedures to follow. Brandon was an adult now. At his age, one officer told her, he had a right to be missing. Annette was horrified. Her son had called for help. He'd been trying to get home. He was stuck somewhere in the cold, possibly hurt. This wasn't some kid out partying. This was an emergency. But the sheriff's office initially wouldn't move without waiting the standard 24 hours. Annette and Brian had to go above their heads, contacting the sheriff directly before anyone would help them. Finally, around noon that day, officials from the sheriff's office contacted Brandon's cell phone provider. The phone records confirmed everything Brian and Annette had said. There had been a late-night call for help, multiple calls between Brandon and his parents. But the records also revealed something shocking. Brandon hadn't been anywhere near Lind. The cell tower data placed him more than 25 miles away, somewhere between the tiny towns of Porter and Taunton, near the border between Lyon and Lincoln counties. Brandon had been completely, utterly lost. Armed with this new information, deputies quickly located Brandon's car. It was high-centered in a ditch right on the county line, stuck on a dirt field road that was barely even a road at all. Lyon County Sheriff Eric Wallen described it. There was nothing odd about it. If a person passed by, they would think it was just parked there or broken down and stuck. Lincoln County Sheriff Jack Vizecki added, it was off the side of a field approach and the vehicle was hung up. It's sort of a sharp incline, nothing major, but enough that the car would get hung up so the wheels are too high off the ground to get any traction. Inside the car, everything seemed normal. No signs of a struggle. No blood. Brandon had simply gotten out and walked away. The problem was figuring out which direction he'd gone. The gravel roads left no footprints. The grass in the ditches showed no clear trail. And in an incredibly unfortunate coincidence, portions of the road had been graded, resurfaced with fresh gravel that very morning, possibly obscuring any tracks Brandon might have left. Searchers fanned out in every direction. An airplane flew overhead looking for clues. Friends and family walked the fields slowly, methodically, calling out Brandon's name. Nothing. The next day, search dog teams arrived from South Dakota and the Twin Cities. Handlers gave the dogs items of Brandon's clothing to pick up his scent. Most of the dogs couldn't find anything. But one dog, one bloodhound, locked onto something. The dog headed south from Brandon's car, then turned west. It followed a scent trail along the gravel road for about half a mile before entering a field near the driveway of an abandoned farm. From there, the dog roughly followed the course of the Yellow Medicine River. The Yellow Medicine River isn't much of a river in this area, more of a creek or stream winding through farmland. But in mid-May, with spring runoff, it was flowing high and fast. Depths ranged from knee-high to 15 feet in places. The bloodhound jumped into the river. For a moment, searchers thought this was it. Brandon had fallen in, drowned, been swept away. But then the dog jumped back out on the other side and kept going with what handlers described as good purpose of movement. The trail continued. The dog went north through another field, following Brandon's scent for nearly 3 miles total before finally losing it just short of a gravel road. 3 miles. Brandon had walked 3 miles through fields in the dark. Lyon County Sheriff Joel Dahl called the area around the Yellow Medicine River the only area the dogs are interested in. Everyone became convinced Brandon was in the water. Sheriff Wyzecki personally walked 2 miles of the riverbank every single day for 30 days straight, looking for any sign of Brandon. He found nothing. Volunteers joined the search. Teams with cadaver dogs combed the river for miles across both counties. The dogs showed no interest, no indication of human remains. 2 weeks after Brandon disappeared, a massive search effort descended on the area. Teams on foot, on horseback, on ATVs, an aviation group with special low-flying aircraft. A former dive official volunteered. The nonprofit Minnesota Search and Rescue Recovery Unit sent teams. Specialized sonar equipment was deployed underwater. Everyone was confident Brandon would be found. "If I had to lay any money down," Sheriff Dahl said, "I'd say we're missing him somewhere in the water. He's in an eddy somewhere being held down by a log. He's got to be here." But he wasn't. Summer came. The water level dropped. Still nothing. By fall, after the crops had been harvested and the fields cleared, they brought in 10 cadaver dogs to search the empty farmland. Nothing. No keys. No phone. No glasses. No clothing. No bones. Nothing. Over the following years, the search continued. Hundreds of volunteers. 45 different highly trained search dogs from 9 different states. Tens of thousands of hours spent walking thousands of miles through fields, ditches, streams. The searches turned up nothing. That's the recurring theme here. In 2010, Brandon's case was added to VICAP, the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. The inclusion made people wonder, does the FBI think Brandon encountered a violent criminal? One detail in the VICAP release stands out. It states that the doors to Brandon's car were left open, not unlocked. Open, as in physically ajar. Multiple doors. That seems odd for someone who simply got stuck and walked away. Why leave the doors standing open? Lyon County Sheriff Eric Wallen had said there was nothing odd about the car, but open doors would be odd. Were they unlocked and someone opened them later? Or had Brandon left them open himself? We don't know. There are also whispers. Rumors in small towns that never quite go away. Some claim Brandon owed someone money, that there was an argument at one of the parties that night, that he was involved in something he shouldn't have been. A pipe was reportedly found in Brandon's car, leading some to speculate about substances. But there's nothing to suggest Brandon had any problems with that. His friend said he seemed happy and fine that night. Sheriffs who investigated said they had no reason to believe he was heavily impaired or involved in anything criminal. Still, the rumors persist. Because when someone vanishes without a trace, people need an explanation. Any explanation. Brandon's mother, Annette, believes her son is gone. She's believed it from the beginning. "Maybe I'm a terrible mother for this," she said. "But I felt very early on, before the first 24 hours were up, that something terribly wrong had happened." But the Swanson family has never held a memorial service for Brandon. They keep their porch light on for him every night, the same thing they did the night he disappeared, hoping he'd see it and find his way home. "People don't vanish into thin air," Annette said, "but it sure seems like he did." The most haunting detail of Brandon's disappearance is how thoroughly he's been searched for. This isn't a case where police gave up after a week. This isn't a case where only a few square miles were covered. Over 140 square miles have been systematically searched. 45 different search dogs. Tens of thousands of volunteer hours. GPS documentation of every inch of ground covered. Jeff Hasse, the search manager, called it the most well-documented search ever conducted. If Brandon was in the area, they should have found him. They didn't. Which means either he's somehow hidden in a place they haven't looked, a place that's evaded 16 years of intensive searching, or he's not in the area at all. Maybe he was swept much farther down the Yellow Medicine River than anyone thought possible. Maybe someone did take him, moved him, buried him somewhere else. Or maybe in those final seconds on the phone when he said, "Oh shit," something happened that we simply can't explain. Something that left nothing behind to find. Brandon's father Brian still remembers that last sound. The silence. And then nothing. Somewhere in western Minnesota, the answer to what happened to Brandon Swanson is waiting. It has to be. People don't just vanish. Except sometimes they do. Brandon Victor Swanson disappeared on May 14, 2008, near the border of Lyon and Lincoln counties in southwestern Minnesota. He was 19 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, 125 pounds, brown hair and blue eyes. He was wearing blue jeans, a blue striped polo shirt, a black hoodie, and a white Minnesota Twins baseball cap. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and was legally blind in his left eye. His green Chevy Lumina was found high-centered in a ditch on a field road, abandoned, but showing no signs of anything suspicious. His cell phone, glasses, and car keys have never been found. Brandon's case led to the passage of Brandon's Law in Minnesota, which requires law enforcement to immediately investigate missing person reports when someone disappears under dangerous circumstances, regardless of age. If you have any information about Brandon Swanson's disappearance, please contact the Lyon County Sheriff's Office at 507-537-3700 or the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at 651-779-3700. The search continues. If this case moved you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Hit that like button to help this video reach more people who might have information. And subscribe to Cold Case Chronicle so we can continue bringing attention to cases like Brandon's that deserve answers. Thank you for watching. Until next time.